my friends. Welcome to this session titled The Inner Work of Radical Unschooling and Peaceful Parenting. Our guest today is one of the most well-known pioneers in the world of self-directed education and unschooling, Dayna Martin. When I first began my journey as an unschooling mama, Dayna was the person that most helped me to relax into my inner confidence and intuitive knowing as a mom. She helped me to see just how magical and nourishing this new life can be. Now, for those of you who are new to her work, Dayna is the world-renowned pioneer at the leading edge of the, quote, unschooling movement. She is best known for expanding the unschooling philosophy beyond education into the realm of parenthood and family life. She advocates for the new partnership-based paradigm, which she calls radical unschooling or peaceful parenting. Dayna has been a featured speaker at many parenting and educational conferences worldwide. She's been on the Dr. Phil Show, CNN Nightline, the Jeff Probst Show, Wife Swap, Fox News, 60 Minutes, and a recent HBO series. She was an informational resource for homeschooling stories on Discovery Channel, The Today Show, Our America on the OWN Network, and on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Dayna has traveled all around the world helping families change their lives by changing their parenting paradigm to bring more peace and connection with our children. Beyond all this, Dayna is also a doula, a midwife, an entrepreneur, an herbalist, an Ayurvedic healer. In my opinion, a true pioneer amongst pioneers. Last year, Dayna joined us for our Luminous event and introduced our community to radical unschooling and peaceful parenting. And this year, we are so blessed to have her back to dive much deeper into the core of this life, the inner work and inner dimensions of parenting and education as we live into this new paradigm. This is going to be a very powerful and juicy conversation. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming the author of Radical Unschooling, Raising Rebels, the pioneer of the peaceful parenting and radical unschooling movement, the very inspiring and beautiful Dayna Martin.
Hi, well, thank you so much. What an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us again.
You're welcome. I can't wait. I'm so looking forward to connecting with your community and to go deeper into what we shared last year.
So before we get into the super juicy stuff, could we please start by just defining some terms? What is your definition of unschooling? What is your definition of radical unschooling and peaceful parenting? Could you ground us in that understanding first?
Sure. Most people that homeschool, they do what schools do at home. So they'll buy a curriculum and their child will be in the same dynamic of an authoritarian imposed curriculum. There's varying degrees of that, but unschooling is very different. It's self-directed learning. But what it means to me is that my children are always learning in whatever they choose to do. And rather than standing in front of them as the all-knowing authority, I'm facilitating their learning based on what they're drawn to and what they love. So it's very child-directed and it's very joy-based. So forced learning is something that I really believe we should move away from, because I don't believe forced learning is learning. I feel that delight-driven, internally motivated learning is what we're meant to do. And just like we're doing now, we're helping each other learn based on our passions. And I really feel that that's very important for the evolution of human consciousness. So it's a trust-based learning. And what radical unschooling is extending the trust-based idea with education into every area of a child's life. Now, I know that's the more complicated part of it for most people, but I have 4 children. I have a 14-year-old son, a 17-year-old daughter, a 20-year-old daughter, and a 23-year-old son. And I have parented this way from day one. We've never lived any other way. And for me, this has been amazing to extend in every area of their life. So living in a partnership-based paradigm is very different than a traditional authoritarian-based paradigm. So with authoritarian parenting, it's focused on the parents' needs for obedience, compliance, and it's focused on behavior modification. And I feel that that is very similar to dog training almost. And I think that when people can see the obedience dynamic that's really pushed upon us, we would never do just naturally. If we were on a deserted island with our children and they were born, we would never be focused on obedience and compliance. And so where did that come from? So much of my work is based in that. So my children have freedom in every area of their lives. They've never been punitively punished by me or by anyone. They do know that there are rules and laws in the world, though, and we could talk about that. They've never had anything but freedom surrounding bedtime, foods, technology use, whatever they want to do with their time. And most people, I think, assume that children would make really bad choices when given freedom like that, because we weren't trusted as children ourselves. And so we can't imagine that that could be possible, but it is possible. And children make really good choices when they're supported and you're living a rich, full life together. So that's it in a nutshell.
Right from the get-go, I can just feel a lot of people thinking, wow, that's too much freedom. That aren't there, talk to us about the edge of the safety boundaries.
Sure.
For example, my toddler, she's 2.5 now. She's gotten really good at not running into the streets when we walk outside, So in the beginning, I did have to hold her hand tightly because she wasn't aware, right? Like it would be neglectful parenting if I just didn't set some ground rules of like when we're outside and if there are cars, you hold mama's hand because I don't want you running into traffic. So talk to us about how to navigate. What is that edge where it's like, sometimes I think we think it's so free that it's neglectful, but you're talking about being super present with your kids.
Yeah, that's the big piece that I think a lot of people are missing when they first hear about it, especially with different TV shows and things I've been on to promote this, is they like to share what we don't do, but they don't share what we do instead. And that's the most important thing. And so you would need to be present with your kids. So rules and punishments are a replacement for being present. So if you have a rule against not playing with fire, and what if your child does? You need to enforce that rule with a punishment. But what is the child really learning? They're not learning the intended thing. If they're drawn to something, then we want to be with them and say, okay, let me do this with you safely while you explore it. But traditional parenting and authoritarian-based parenting is focused on, it's more convenience-based parenting. And this is a very hands-on life. And so the presence required takes a lot of inner work. It really does, especially if we weren't parented this way. And I think that a lot of parents may not be able to, or think they may not be able to live this life because they don't have the time, or, a lot of things have to be rearranged sometimes to be able to do it. But it's the opposite of neglectful parenting, actually, because you need to be there. You need to be giving information. And when you're not living in a control-based system within your house, your children don't fear you. When they're not fearing that they're going to be getting in trouble and having their freedoms taken away, whether they're grounded or have toys taken away, or all the different things that parents do to try to control their kids, without that, they're not afraid of you. And so there's a lot of discussions, a lot of talking about things and experiencing things hands-on. And it's a lot of work, but once you really get it, once you integrate it, it just becomes second nature, because I feel this is the most natural way to live. I really do. I truly do. And it's been very joyful for me in helping others walk this path.
Talk to us about the work part. Like it is a lot of energy to learn to be so present with your kids. So to throw away all the rules and just be present and allow the right action that is filled with love and wisdom to arise from that presence. That's a tall order. It requires, I think a lot of us are thinking as we listen to you, like that requires being on all the time. And I just have to be honest with myself. Like I can't be on all the time like that. I need a break sometimes, right? So then we flip-flop back to the authoritarian way just because we're like tired, How do you strike that balance? Because you've coached thousands of people through this transition. We also need to be honest with ourselves as moms and dads that we're on a journey of transition. We can't just flip a switch and be as wise and experienced as Dayna Martin, who's been doing this for 2.5 decades and, has 4 kids and coached thousands of people. Like we'd like to just flip a switch and be that present, but we know that we have a journey to get there. Talk to us about that journey.
I mean, it's taken me 25 years almost to get, my son's 23. So I wasn't always this, zen about everything. And in fact, I had a lot of anxiety early on. And in the beginning, you really you're processing a lot. You're asking yourself questions like, do I have to say no to this? And what will happen if I say yes? And should I allow this? Shouldn't I? How can I navigate this? So the inner talk that you go through and the healing that needs to happen is a lot for people in the beginning, I think, at varying degrees based on how we were parented ourselves. Some people have a hard time letting go of fears surrounding freedom with technology or food freedom and these kind of things. So depending upon who it is, everyone has a unique challenge. So I think asking yourself, why am I making this decision? If you're coming from a place of fear, we generally want to control. And that's when the authoritarian or more culturally conditioned reactions happen. When you feel fear is when you want to just take a deep breath. And many, many times I would ask my children when they were younger, I would say, I need a few minutes to think about that. Because I didn't want to come from a place of reaction. So it really is just an inner job. It's the inner work that needs to happen because kids come to this life so authentically and so naturally. This is the most natural way of being for them. And the work that we go through it's so worth it. It really is. So, and it's much more, it's not that difficult in the sense of, I think the authoritarian dynamic of control is a really unpleasant way to be with a human being. If you're controlling and threatening and angry and punishing and in that place of stress all the time, parenting is not fun. It's not joyful. It's difficult. And so when you're coming from a joy base and the children are respected and what they want to do with their time, it just flows a lot easier. So it's harder in some ways and easier in others. It just depends on who you are and how far you need to come from the authoritarian dynamic.
In some ways, there's more work short term for us to do the inner work. So we bring a different quality, a presence into our relationship with our kids, with our family. And then long term is much easier, I've noticed, because now you're empowering your kids to make wise choices for themselves. So you don't have to, it's a lot of work to keep trying to control the situation all the time. That's exhausting, actually.
Yeah. And I think just seeing all the healing that all of us have to do at this point after the last decade, of having children and seeing what's happening in the world, that I don't want my children to have to spend their whole adult years healing, because I want them to have the freedom and for this to be second nature. And so when you start parenting this way, you realize that it's kind of this twofold thing that's happening is you're healing through parenting your children in the way that you should have been parented. And so that in itself, that healing that childhood stuff that we're all dealing with is hugely powerful for you as a parent in your own personal evolution. And also modeling for your kids a partnership-based paradigm is so much healthier as well, because they're not growing up with the issues that most kids have to deal with. So it's the investment and the time to do the inner work for this to be necessary is so worth it. So worth it. And I can tell you that as a fact with almost 3 adult kids who have been parented this way from the beginning and a 14-year-old, that at this point in my life, I'm so grateful that I did this because it goes by so quick. I had a dream the other night that I was crying in my dream and I was like, I wish I had their childhoods back. That's how beautiful and joyful that it was for me. And it goes by so quick. So when you're in the midst of difficulty and integrating a new philosophy, it may seem like a really big thing at the time, but when you step back and see everything from the broader perspective, I may have a lot of regrets in my life from my entire lifetime, but the way I'm parenting will never be one of them. And that's huge for me. And that gives me peace every day. So,
wow. That makes me want to cry because I'm thinking about how we had another interview with another guest named Masajati, and he talked about how when our kids become teenagers, we have this idea that teenagers they're embarrassed by their parents and they want to push them away. But really, what are the kids wanting to push away is that whole authoritarian paradigm and all that energy. They don't actually want to push their moms and dads away. They want to love and be intimate and close and have a rich and fulfilling relationship with mom and dad.
Yeah.
But as we come to transition towards adulthood, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. It's just a big hot mess. All these distorted memories and patterns that we picked up with how we were parented, that's what the kids want to push away. So I'm moved to consider that maybe when my kids are teenagers, that we'll have an even deeper and richer relationship instead of being somebody that they're embarrassed to be around.
Yeah. And it's funny because I never really minded if they would be embarrassed of me. I thought it would be kind of go hand in hand with parenting, even walking this path. So I've been so surprised that they're not, and they actually like spending time with me. Now, it has its challenges when they have partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, wives that are not in the paradigm that come in and they're kind of like, you want to hang out with your mom again today? And, Ivy, my 17-year-old's like, yeah, she's my best friend. I want to hang out with her. And so there is like this kind of from the outer world, from people that are really have to learn about it and kind of integrate into it. My daughter's boyfriend lives with us. He's 18 and he has some friends coming from LA to visit us here. And they were planning their time of what they wanted to do. And David said, we're going to hang out with Ivy and her family one night. And they were like, what? Oh my gosh, we're finally away from our parents and adults. You want to hang out? And he's like, no, really, you should. They're really fun and they're great and kind. And so it's interesting to see now that they're older, how the outer world kind of interacts with all of this. And I really, really see a contrast. And I told them, I said, you don't have to hang out with us. Like, they're not going to want to hang out with us. They don't understand that we're just people, because with age segregation and the authoritarian paradigm, there is a distinct difference, isn't there? Nobody wants to hang out with adults, no kids or teens. It's just not done. And so when that kind of comes into it, I said, I'm not offended. It's all good. Just go do whatever you guys want to do. You don't have to be here, because they feel like they can't be themselves. Now, my kids and their friends and our family, like, everybody knows that they can fully be themselves, but I can remember feeling that way. Like, oh gosh, the last thing I want to do is hang out with a bunch of 40-year-olds, But to me, this is like the most kind of primitive, natural way to live, because when you're walking this dynamic, my children have learned that their elders, they can learn from them. They want to be around them because they're kind and loving and they're not controlling them or judging them. So to me, the whole tribal dynamic I'm seeing unfold, that when kids aren't controlled, they can learn from their elders in a way that our culture has totally destroyed that. So yeah, just a funny story of real life stuff that happens.
There's this idea that we should respect our elders. Mm-hmm. And I love that on your social media posts, there's a lot of, well, if you want your kids to respect you, why don't you start by respecting your kids first?
Yes.
Talk to us about that. Like, how do we want to nurture these qualities of respect and kindness and presence and deep listening. We all parents, regardless of what paradigm or philosophy, the underlying intention is that we want our kids to grow up to be well-adjusted, kind, loving, respectful humans that have a good life. Right? We all want that. Tell us how this is actually the more direct path to get to that.
Well, sure. It's interesting. We hear that children need to respect their elders. But what elders in our society who are living in an authoritarian paradigm really mean is obey. And when you hear it, like, you don't respect me, there's really, if they translate it, it would be, you're not listening to me, you're not obeying me. Because respect is not, we can't just throw around words like that and change the meaning of them to manipulate. And that's when I hear that, I say, no, you're not looking for respect, you're looking for obedience. And when you respect your kids, and I believe that when you're present with them and you're helping them navigate things and you're facilitating their learning and loving them, respect begets respect. But we don't want to get mix these words up, and that's what confuses parents. My children do respect me, but I don't think respect is obedience.
What is your definition of respect?
Understanding one another's needs, being compassionate about them, and not focusing on behavior, and instead focusing on why. What are our needs? How do we help each other? It's caring about one another and understanding each other's personal boundaries that we might have, or things that we're uncomfortable with, and not forcing or pushing or talking or coercing people into things they don't want to do, whether it's eating the broccoli on your plate or whether it's, going on a road trip. I mean, respect to me is honoring the individual and not trying to pull them into your needs without respecting theirs. So it's about finding a balance with one another. Everyone's needs matter equally, everybody, not just the parents, like in traditional parenting. Everybody's needs matter equally. And I've modeled that to my kids from day one. And to me, this is like a mini microcosm of what world peace is. Because when you're raising human beings in the authoritarian paradigm, which is focused on the adult's needs only, of obedience, compliance, and whatever the adult wants to do, you're modeling that power rules. And when that you're bigger and stronger than somebody, you force them or coerce them or punish them or threaten them to do what you want to do. And we wonder why there's so much chaos in the world raising human beings like that. So if children learn what they live, and from the beginning, or as soon as we learn about it, we can focus on their needs under their behavior and help them get what they want in life and be compassionate toward their needs. I mean, this really is what the world needs, I believe in my heart, for world peace to even be possible.
I love that you shared that this is about honoring everybody's needs. Because in this life, I noticed that some of us on the beginnings of our journey, we flip flop from the super authoritarian way to totally martyrdom, right? So as moms and dads, we are juggling a lot. And so there's a lot of self-love and self-compassion that naturally then extends into love and compassion for our kids and our community, that we can't give to our kids what we don't also give to ourselves. So it becomes this strange, distorted energy when we flip-flop into martyrdom. It's like everything, just let the kids run wild, and then we totally kind of like don't give them guidance about, how to safely cross the street, or how to, if they want to play with fire, to teach them about how to play with fire safely, for example. And we just let them like run the house. And then we don't feel good about being in a house that is run by a bunch of toddlers, right? Like, so there is a balancing act here that you're talking about that can be subtle and nuanced.
Yes, and I love that you bring this up because I think this is a big hurdle for people. So the authoritarian paradigm is that one person's making the decisions and the other person, may be respected in various levels, but they need to listen and to that other person. So what happens, and it's a really common thing when people come to this life and they want to integrate a philosophy like this, sometimes in the process of integrating it, what happens in the beginning is they flip the paradigm and they put the child in the role of the authority, because that's the only dynamic. It's hard to look out. Living in partnership is very different than how most people were raised. It's very different in the workplace. The authoritarian paradigm is everywhere. I mean, it's just how the world is. And so the first step sometimes is the parent will be like, okay, well, the child's the authority, and they'll ask their child permission to take a shower, and like, honey, what do you want for dinner? And not that we shouldn't ask those questions, but your needs matter. But if you don't know how to live any other way, flipping that paradigm it's a huge burden on the child. I've had parents call me and say, my son won't even let me go to bed. And I'm thinking, okay, I understand where you're at. You've just flipped it. You flipped the authoritarian paradigm, and that's okay. That's what but sadly, sometimes people think that's what unschooling or peaceful parenting is. And they never have their needs met because the child doesn't know how to meet the parent's needs. And the parent, just because it's so hard in our culture, the way we were raised, because we were never asked about what our needs were. And when you're raised that way, if you're only meeting everybody else's needs and you come into adulthood, so many times in the beginning of this, when my kids were little, I would have to sit and say, what are my needs right now? I couldn't even tap into them. I didn't know. I knew I felt out of control, but it was so hard to get to the point of, what do I want right now? What are my needs right now? And I think that's a really important first step, is to really understand that, because when you're flipping that paradigm and you're putting that huge burden on your child to make the decisions for you, you have to find that beautifully balanced place in partnership where everybody's needs matter. But you need to be, confident and come into your own enough to say, my needs matter too. I don't have to force anyone else to meet them, but I need to find a way to meet them. Because if I don't, like you said, the martyrdom thing, and, our mothers, when they were becoming, growing up, martyrdom was looked at as virtuous. You can even see it on old TV shows, and it's not. It's kind of sad. and I feel bad for mothers that are in that place because they think they're doing what was best, putting everybody else first. But if mother is it doesn't have to be a mother, father is it's the heart energy of the home. If they're not meeting their needs, it's like they're not getting oxygen and everyone's lives are affected. So you might think you're being a martyr, but for one, you're not modeling to your children that everybody's needs matter. And so then they grow up and they're a martyr and they never take the responsibility to meet their needs. So letting go of martyrdom, which is kind of easy to put everybody else first, that's kind of the easy thing to do. It's not virtuous. It's hard to sit in that place and say, who am I? What are my needs right now? And how can I meet them? We didn't have that modeled for us. So that is just as important as anything else. Yeah. I hope that made sense, because that's kind of a complicated aspect of this life when people do flip it. But it is a good sign. I don't think someone's doing it wrong. I just say, okay, you flipped it. That's sometimes the next step there before you kind of, that pendulum, goes from one authority to the other, to the child, and then you kind of come right back in the middle. So
I love what you said earlier about just in the beginning of this journey, just give yourself permission to not know. And if the situation arises, just tell the kids, hey, I need a couple minutes to just think about what's the right next move for this.
yes.
Because the world is actually like the world in general is full of false emergencies. Like if there's no actual life-threatening situation in front of you, we can always take a deep breath and say, you know what?
Yes.
Give me a couple minutes to think about this. Like, I'm not sure right now. That's modeling so many things for your kids. The humility to say, I'm not going to pretend to know. And the honesty and integrity, the authenticity that you're modeling for the kids. To me, that is the most profound piece, is you're showing the kids that, mom and dad, we're not perfect. We're doing our best. And sometimes I don't know the answer and I need a moment. And if there's nothing life-threatening happening, I'm going to give myself that moment and I'm going to be honest with you about my process.
Yeah, I love that. And I think most people on this path, we're so like ambitiously, lovingly wanting to facilitate our children's needs all the time. I do love it. It means a lot to me. But sometimes I used to be really quick to say yes to something when I said, oh gosh, I don't know if I really want to do that, because I want them to be happy. I want to facilitate what they want to do. And I think when we do that enough times, we're kind of doing ourselves a disservice if we're not really energetically behind the collective decision to do something, whether it's going to the mall or going to the park or whatever it is. So, my daughter right before this call said, but after your interview, do you want to go to this outdoor mall? And I said, I'm not sure yet. Let me get through it and I'll see how I feel. I'd like to go with you. And right now I feel like it's a yes, but I just want to make sure, because who knows, I could be exhausted after this, or, and also if I say yes to something, not knowing how I'll feel after something else, I don't want to let her down. So my kids are very, very comfortable with me saying, that sounds like fun, but let me just get on the other side of this and then we'll make the decision together. That's very empowering as a woman as well. And they do the same thing. I'll say, do you want to go out to eat tonight? Well, I'm supposed to do this thing. Let me get back to you. Asking for a minute makes a huge difference. So you can sit and ask yourself, okay, what do I want to do? How many times have we agreed to do something that we really didn't want to do? And then our energy when we're there is going to ruin the whole experience for someone else. Or it's been done to us, right? With martyr mothers or whatever, person in our life that's done that. I don't want to be somebody who's modeling saying yes to something, but everything within me, they're reading energetically is saying no. What is that modeling? You're doing things you don't want to do. You're modeling that's what you should do in life. No, it's not, because we get in dangerous situations when that happens. And I feel like it's really unhealthy to our souls. So modeling that, take a deep breath, figure out if you really want to do something, and then move forward. It's much more pleasant to be with family and friends and people we love when we know their body, mind, and soul want to be in that experience, versus getting dragged along and they're like the whole time. And you're like, what's wrong? Nothing. That's also unhealthy. So yeah, I lived with that growing up with my mother. So oh man.
Well, talk about respect. Someone who, when they say yes, they really mean yes on all levels, body, mind, emotion, soul, and they're going to be potent and present in that interaction. That's somebody that commands respect without being commanding, just because they're so present and so fully there when they are there. And so when somebody says no, you know that they've taken time and put some consideration to it, that these yeses and nos, they really mean something. To me, when I interact with somebody like that, that makes me want to respect them more.
Yes, exactly. So respect for the self is the first and foremost important thing. And so when you respect yourself enough to go with either a clear yes or a clear no, that is powerful for not only me, but for everyone around me.
This is so profound because this is talking about a new kind of human that is completely in their integrity and how they live life. What a big hot mess we've created of our society, just because from this simple piece of people don't know how to check in with themselves for the yeses and nos in life, and then they don't know how to communicate these yeses and nos. So it's just a big hot mess out there, right? Like people don't know how to be authentic and communicate clearly and get clear within themselves.
Right. Yeah, that's very healing. Getting clear is such an important part of this life. And when I asked for a minute, and I don't really have to so much anymore with the kids older, but when they were younger, I would just say, I need a minute to think about that. I needed to get into a space of clarity to find an answer within me, even for the smallest of things, because that was something that was never offered to us when we were younger. No one ever, not that no one ever cared, but it wasn't done that way, because what was important was listening to the adults, going through the motions, jumping through the hoops. And this dynamic, it might have labels such as radical unschooling, peaceful parenting, but to me, this is just living in the most holistic sense of the word. And so many areas of my life have been so profoundly affected and changed just from making that parenting decision.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the other ripple effects that you've experienced shifting your parenting philosophy. How has that influenced, career and relationships with friends, families, neighbors? Talk to us about that.
Sure. Well, unschooling my kids has really taught me, and it taught me very early on, that we do not have to be forced to do things we hate, that we can have a very good life and then a living based on what we love to do. When kids have the time to pursue what they're passionate about and do nothing but that, whether it's baking or fishing or whatever it is they love to do with their time, they become experts in whatever they're doing. And in turn, can be self-employed, for example, doing what they love doing. And so that modeled to me, I was facilitating it and I was aware of it, but I did apply that to myself. After I gave birth to my first child, the birthing process was so mind-blowing to me, and I had grown so much from having a natural birth that I said I want to talk to other people about this and teach them. And I became a childbirth teacher and a doula and later a midwife. My passion has spun in so many different directions, and modeling that for my kids. My kids have never seen me wake up in the morning and say, I gotta go to work. Can't wait to get home. They have never experienced that. And so that wouldn't make sense to them to do that. And so they never have. They've always pursued what they love to do. They've always had the freedom to quit anything they're doing and start something new. So it's inspired me in the way of my own work, that I don't want to do anything that I'm pushing myself to do in a way that it's miserable. I joyfully do everything that I do because I love it. It's my passion. And so in that way, it's really been powerful. The other areas that it's affected my life was focusing on the needs under my kids' behavior. Instead of modifying or controlling their behavior, it naturally extended outward to everyone in my life. So first, my mother, for example, she would be reactive and maybe judgmental. And I just focused on, what is she afraid of? What are her needs? So the relationships I had with people changed profoundly because I started wanting more than being mistreated by other people or being controlled or being put down. And there's so many areas in our life where people are allowed into our lives that are like that. And so I started becoming much more discerning with other people who respected me. I started respecting my children. I started to understand that that was a really important aspect of living in general. It also extended to my marriage, actually, which ended 5 years ago. My ex-partner, I started wanting to be treated with the same respect I gave him and the kids. And I realized that there were things that were dysfunctional. Some people can work those out, and that's wonderful. My choice to not, because he wasn't willing to change, for example, it was a really beautiful separation, because we openly communicated. So the dynamics, no matter whether relationships are starting or ending, when you're modeling something for your kids, you want the same respect for yourself. And sometimes we don't have that until we've parented a while and we're like, wait a minute, this way is, I deserve this from everybody too. So it affected my lives like that. I started facilitating the people I love, whoever it was, not just my kids, their learning. So the facilitation of learning with unschooling, I was like, I want to do this for other people. My mother shows me an interest. She tells me she's interested in gardening. I'll be ordering her gardening books, getting her new gardening gloves. My best friend is interested in sound healing. Awesome. I'm going to get her a sound bowl. So facilitation of learning with your kids is one way of showing love. When somebody loves you and they give you a gift or facilitate an experience or bring you a mentor into your life, they show you that they care about you. And so I was seeing this expression of love that was naturally coming to me with my kids. And I said, this is how I want to show it to everyone I love and all my friends and everyone I'm connected with. So living this life bettered my relationships. I no longer was standing for disrespect from people in my life. I made really big, powerful life decisions to get more in alignment, to be surrounded with people who were living in partnership, not just with their kids, but with everybody.
Yes.
I decided that I would never work in my life and not like it. So I guess you could say it's changed everything, basically.
It totally purified and upgraded everything, it sounds like. I mean, and it's been doing that for me too. I think as humans, we just really are really fundamental need is just to be seen. What you're talking about is that you see yourself deeply and you choose to see other people deeply. Not just go through the motions of life, but really get deeper and richer with your relationships with everybody.
Yeah, and I just upgraded what I wanted in my life for female friends, for example. I think so many of us going through the traditional dynamic, there's frenemies, and people are kind of backstabbing and talking about each other and gossiping. And that whole paradigm, I think, is part of almost everybody's life. And then at one point, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. I don't want to be in that dynamic. I want to respect everybody. And so there were friendships lost because I didn't want to be around that anymore. And it can be challenging sometimes, but it's worth the effort. I always said to myself, I'd rather have one wonderful female best friend than 15 people who really aren't invested or really caring about me. I started noticing situations in which I would share something about my life with someone, and they couldn't wait to tell me how they had had it harder, or kind of competitive with who suffered the most, and really kept focusing the energy back on them. And I'm like, they don't really seem to care about me. When I started really living in a state of partnership and caring about my children like I did, and started caring about myself that way, it was kind of hard to see the world around me and so many people I was connected with that really didn't care about me at all. And so I'm like, why am I doing this? So the inner work and the thought process, and the funny thing was, Edith, none of this was really an intention I set. But once you start evolving your consciousness in a partnership base with your children, it just naturally goes outward. Have you found that? It's just this natural evolution of wait a minute, I can apply this here and here. And feels so good to continue to evolve like this.
Yeah. I guess for all of us, because the world is in transition, we're straddling the old world and the new. A lot of the challenges that pop up is that everything you're saying, we can feel in our center, we can feel in our core. Yes, I feel a resonance. This is about me being so much more present with life and just being totally honest with myself and totally honest with one another, and being present with our friends and family, and kind of requiring that everybody around us step up their A game and be more present, more authentic, more honest with themselves too. but in the transition, we bump into a lot of challenges because most of the world doesn't quite operate like this yet.
Right.
So tell us about some of those common challenges that you see people bump into, because it's like parallel reality structures that are happening. Like a lot of us are, if we're lucky, we have a community of other like-minded families that also choose to operate like this. But then you bump into you interact with some people and it's just like there's this glitchiness that I notice, right? Because there's a culture clash.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges that I see in supporting parents is not having support from family. That's a big challenge, especially if people were raised in the authoritarian paradigm, like 99.9% of people were. They were raised to be people pleasers. And when obedience is the focus and pleasing the adults is the focus, when you start to parent in a different way and no one around you is thinking it's a good idea, for one, you begin to doubt yourself, especially early on. You fear it. And the hard thing is being rejected, and for people to think that you're lazy or neglectful or not strong, and to be judged in a society that everything was based on us being judged in a positive way to survive. Quite frankly, sometimes you feel like you're going to die because we're wired like that. We're meant to live in tribes. Our brains are wired like that. We were conditioned to please everybody around us, to do what they wanted. And when they told us that we were doing well, then we could love ourselves. We got the approval of others. We became so thirsty for the approval of our parents and teachers. And when all of a sudden you become a parent, you're doing something differently, and that rug's pulled out from under you, and you're like listening to your instinct with your children, all of a sudden everything gets glitchy when everyone around you is going, you're crazy. What are you doing? These kids are never going to be successes. And then it's like, oh gosh, they're not approving of me. And like, I'm going to be cast out and I'm going to die. I swear these feelings are so primitive. That's the difficult time. And I mean, I've been on the phone with many, many parents crying, saying like, my parents think we're crazy and they're not inviting us over anymore. And that is why building community right now, Edith, is so important, because those that are cast out by people that don't understand, I want them to know that they have love and support and they're not alone. The thing is, once you realize that you were conditioned with all these fears, you're not going to die. And in fact, when you rise above all of these primitive conditioned feelings and say, you're going to be okay if your parents don't think well of what you're doing. That's a huge deal, to say, I understand why my parents don't agree with me. And you have compassion for them for that. And yet you still confidently go on and understand and are very confident in saying, I know you don't understand, and I really don't want to talk to you about this anymore. Or, lovingly set your boundaries and say, they don't get it. Most of us, it takes a really long time to learn about this life, to let go of old patterns and old conditioning and rise like phoenixes out of, where we've come from. It takes so much effort and the internal motivation to be different. With an unschooling philosophy, we don't want forced learning to come into the dynamic with our kids. So we can't expect people that aren't wanting to, understand it to do so. We can't force our parents to learn about it. We can't force our friends to learn about it, our extended family. So what do? We still confidently move forward, have compassion that they don't get it. It's okay if they think you're crazy. You're not. And so getting really comfortable with judgment is a big, big part of walking this path. And I'm the last person that you would have ever guessed, if you would have seen me before I was a parent, that could have survived with doing this. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because if I could get to a point of being comfortable with the discomfort of everyone around me and without the approval of everyone around me, if I can do it, you can. That's what I like to tell people.
What I've noticed on my journey is definitely that as I got more comfortable, the criticism just went away.
Yes.
So I think I was creating some of those uncomfortable, judgmental experiences just because I hadn't gotten really solid and clear within myself. So you get to a point where you just feel grateful for all your friends and family being so judgy. You're like, oh, thank you for showing me where I have more work so that I can feel more solid in this life path.
Yes, beautiful. And something huge that I've learned is that when you're not looking for someone else's approval, we're not so affected by their judgment. And so people aren't generally going to give you their opinions unless you're looking for their approval. If you're going to your parents and saying, what do you think? And if you're feeling self-doubt, they're going to come from the authoritarian paradigm unless they're aware of this, because that's all they know. And so the answers for, children's behavior and issues that are coming up in your life, you're going to hear authoritarian advice because you're turning to people that only have one, small way of looking at things. So when you stop looking for approval from others, it's amazing how they won't give you their opinion as often. I notice that a lot. And when you joyfully are navigating life, who's going to come in unless they're a totally mean person? Who is going to come in and criticize a joyful family? It's like kind of like invincible when you hit that level of confidence to say, I get it. I'm not mad at anyone for judging me. I would have judged somebody, if you would have told me 25 years ago that I'd be parenting this way, I would have been like, wow, you're crazy. People are in that space. Remember who you were before you knew all of this. And remember the judgments you had of others before you understood things like this. And so now that you do, you spread that compassion to everybody and you're not a victim to it anymore. You're opening your heart to a partnership dynamic instead of the cultural idea of victimization all the time. Oh, they hate me. They don't approve of me. Nobody loves me. No one accepts me. When you let go of all that inner talk and instead you're like, I get it. I would have thought it was crazy too. And that's actually the answers that I give people during interviews. Yeah. If they're like, oh, this seems insane. I said, trust me, I felt the same way before I really educated myself about this and lived it. So can you see when you have those kind of responses that aren't in reaction and aren't pushing up against and aren't in like victim, perpetrator victim mode, where you can be in partnership even with people that oppose you? When you come from that place, it's very, very healing and empowering.
Wow. You had a lot of experience with that. You've been in the media so much. I mean, like sometimes they don't portray you kindly. Sometimes they get little sound bites out of context and then you've got millions of people watching who are then misunderstanding your message. How do you deal with that level of misunderstanding and judgment out there? That's like very advanced level of mastery, in my opinion.
Well, having realistic expectations, knowing that that's going to happen. That's how you get through it. I mean, like, I think I never went into any of these experiences not thinking that would happen. I know how the media works. And I'm also really careful in how I present myself, because although they can take sound bites, they can't sound bite the way my energy is and what my energy is communicating in my presence. So it's very important for me anytime I've agreed to an interview, and I've agreed to almost everyone that's ever been asked, because I know the people ready to hear this are going to hear it and they're going to understand it. And I also know that they can't manipulate my being. So I'm careful with my words, very careful. And I just am kind to everybody and show compassion. So even if people are attacking me or screaming at me on a talk show from the audience, I have the same compassion and I agree with them. I'm like, I remember I felt the same way you did before I learned this. So yeah, my mother felt the same way. I dealt with that. And when I choose never to get into an argument with anybody. It takes two people to argue. So although there has been some shows that were really challenging, I'm so grateful for the opportunities, and some were better than others. And I just keep plugging forward. I really enjoy doing it. I like going into those heated debates now because I know I've just learned a lot and how to conduct myself. And I think the level of confidence you have, I wasn't always this confident about it, and so like the more you do it, the more confident you get, the more heart-centered space you come from with everybody. Usually only positive happens. So that's been my experience.
What kinds of practices do you have to get yourself really aligned in your heart space to radiate the right kind of energy in preparation for some of these kinds of interviews that will be portrayed in ways that aren't exactly perfectly aligned?
Well, I usually like take a bath the night before with herbs. I have my own routine rituals. I always need to be alone for a couple hours before, and I light candles. And just feel like I'm just the messenger. So I don't personalize things. That's the biggest thing that's so important when you're sharing publicly with the media. I don't take anything personal. And that is the biggest problem that people kind of run into when they're taking things personal. When even though it might seem like you're being attacked as a personal, in person, that's not what's happening. They're showing a very small, aspect of a philosophy or your life and who you are. And because nobody really knows me, I choose never to take anything personal. So those are the mental spaces I get into. And I just take a deep breath before going out on stage or having cameras in my life where I just say, source, please speak through me when I can't. And I really feel like that happens. I feel like I'm kind of divinely supported when I let go, because I'm not somebody that's, oh gosh, I hate going on stage. I'm telling you the truth, Edith. You're getting behind the scenes here, because I've done a lot of like on stage interviews in front of huge crowds, and I have panic attacks almost every time before, because I have a hard time with it. And I had a hard time with it because of my school experience. I was so bullied, so teased for so long. Anytime I'd go in front of the class, that I thought that I was bad at it and I didn't like it. Now, I literally have an argument with myself in my head before going on stage. I'll listen to myself going, oh my gosh, what if people think you're stupid? All the inner talk. What if you don't say the right thing? And my higher self talks to my young, damaged younger self and says, please go sit in the back. I've got this. Just go back. You can come back after. I've got this. And for some reason, once I go up and I go on, something else takes over, where I know it's my chance. It's my chance. All the voices that are, doubting and fearful, they go away. So it's kind of like giving birth, right? I'm just going to give you this quick analogy. So before, when somebody's pregnant, as it gets closer, we get fearful. It's normal. Birth is part of the fearful. Oh gosh, I remember what it was like. This is going to be intense. And fear is a natural part of birth. It's a natural part of public speaking. Once you're actually in labor, the fear's gone. You're so present and you're just doing it. And I remember that each and every time with public speaking. I'm so afraid. I shake. I get up there. Once I'm up there, same thing. I'm so present and in my purpose. So this is the case with almost everybody I know who's an advocate. So if you're somebody who wants to advocate for something, no matter what it is you believe in, if you think that you're afraid of public speaking, you might be like me, but I promise once you get up there, your purpose and source will speak through you and you're able to do it somehow. So yeah, a lot of inner talk, as you could hear from my journey.
Well, what I experience when I hear some of the talks that you've done on stage is that I feel like your high self is talking to my high self.
Yeah.
There is an energetic resonance because you've brought your, what people call I am presence, into form. It triggers mine to come into form. And it's not even the words that you speak, it's like you share. They can never edit out the quality of presence that you're bringing into the conversation. And that is so potent, so powerful for us to remember. And I find that that's the energy with friends and families and neighbors that actually is more effective in communicating as a change agent or a pioneer of a new possibility, is this quality of presence that you're talking about.
Yeah, when you get out of your own conditioned mind and you allow purpose to come through you, it's amazing what you're capable of. If somebody would have told me 30 years ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing, I could have never believed it in who I was then. But parenting is literally what has healed me. And it really has. And so this is why it's so much more than just, switching paradigms from authoritarian to partnership. This is powerful because it changes the parents. It brings them to who they should have been. We might be striving to get back there our whole lives after how we were raised and how things are, but this is who we were meant to be. And so any work that you think is hard with changing paradigms, I know it's much harder going in an inauthentic place and controlling your children. And, I feel like that parents are trained to train their kids. I don't believe that anyone listening would ever parent from an authoritarian paradigm if you weren't conditioned and trained to do so. This is a rebellious thing because it's taking back what your birthright is, and that's for you to have a wonderful relationship with your children, and vice versa. This is about relationships. This is about healing on like a mass scale through taking it back. This is only hard because you were so conditioned and trained to do it a certain way. But once you step into that purposeful place and that like heart-centered place of who you really are and your being, nothing feels better. So you can handle the outer voices of, disdain and people that think you're wrong and all of that. Like, I'm sorry, once you start stepping into who you're really meant to be, nothing else matters because this feels so good. So
You're reminding me, in the Tao Te Ching, there's a passage that says, when you approve of yourself, the whole world approves of you.
Yeah. And when you think also, I love that. And this reminds me of another thing. I know that the divisiveness in our society and all the different levels is not who we really are. And so I kind of have this rebellious attitude before like going into a dynamic with like a debate on a show or something where I'm like, I will not let society make this person my enemy. No way. We have much more in common than anyone wants us to believe. And so my rebelliousness comes out in like a loving way, as funny as that sounds. There was a woman on a talk show with me, I think the Bethany show, and they had like me as like the permissive parent, and she was the world's strictest parent. And of course, we're, not debating, we're just sharing our philosophy. And I'm here listening to her and she's listening to me, and we're totally different. She's totally punitive. Her kids are grounded, and people send other kids to her to straighten them up and train them up. And, at the end of the show, she's like, you want to go out to dinner tonight? And I'm like, all right. The two of us sat together, and I have to tell you, she was the coolest lady, and we had so much more in common than we realized, and she said, actually, I do really do a lot of the things you're sharing about, and I want to more. And they wanted to divide us. They pinned us as like these hardcore different people. I loved her, and we really developed a friendship, and we influenced each other's lives. So even though I don't agree with how she's parenting in some ways, the love that we brought into one another's life by being rebellious and saying, no, you're not going to make us enemies. When you have that attitude about everybody and accept that they may not be ready to do the work necessary to parent differently or to make the choices with their health differently, the most healing thing we could ever do is be peaceful and loving to one another, and the most rebellious thing, actually. Yeah.
This is so powerful. We're towards the end of our hour, and I'd love to talk with you all day long, Dayna. But I love every time I get to chat with you. I get so much out of it, and I just love and appreciate you so much.
I love and appreciate you too. That's just the first time we ever connected. There was such a soul connection that I can like look at you and just feel such love, and brings tears to my eyes sometimes. I'm so grateful that you reached out at that first time. I'm so grateful you've helped so many people, and you're so raw and so vulnerable and so honest in your journey. And I think that's so inspiring for me personally. And I think it's inspiring for everyone that connects with you. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. So for those of us that want to continue learning from you, your books, your groups, your coaching, can you tell us a little bit about your offerings?
Sure. My website is daynamartin.com, and I offer, my favorite thing to do is one-on-one coaching. I love connecting with other parents and helping them. So I do one-on-one coaching. I have group coaching. I have an unschooling support program that's starting this September. It's on a sliding scale, and it's a monthly fee, and it includes group coaching once a week, a monthly one-on-one call with me, and copies of all my books. So it's like this total support program kind of package. Like I said, it's on a sliding scale. No one will be turned away. And I just really want to reach people and let them know like what we talked about, because they're not alone. They have us, and we know what it feels like to walk this path alone. And so to help you get to the mindset of confidence that took me 25 years to get to, let me help you, because I know what to process and how to heal, and I'd be honored to work with you. So yeah, I have a bunch of videos on YouTube. If you look up the Sparkling Martins, I have like 250 videos with like my children, different interviews. You could see what this life is like. And if you want to interview me for a show, if you're somebody listening, I'd love to spread the word as much as possible about how to have world peace through radical unschooling. So thank you so much for having me.
So, to tie up this beautiful conversation, if you were to leave our audience with just last words of wisdom, what is like the most important wisdom that we should keep in our hearts?
I think the most important thing I'd like to leave everybody with is to trust their children, because it's hard to trust ourselves, but they're not conditioned like we are. So trust your children with their freedom.
Thank you so, so much, Dayna. Thank you for pioneering this way for the last almost 25 years. You know, you really anchored in a new energy. We're now weaving all of these new threads of wisdom into something that is fresh and new. And this whole thing about building the new earth, this wisdom that you've brought forth is a huge piece of the puzzle, in my opinion. So thank you so much.
It's an honor. It's an honor to help people. And I'm really grateful to have the support and love that I do in my life. And you're part of that. So thank you, Edith.